Shalom. Welcome to the Jewish View. My name is Rabbi Nachman Simon with the Chabad House of Delmar. We have a very special guest with us today, Shmuel Kochman. Shmuel, welcome to the Jewish View.
Thank you for inviting me.
This is very interesting because this is actually, I probably think this is a unique topic we're in for today, and that is, even though it's the Jewish View, but we're going to talk about the historical background of Christianity, which I'll let Shmuel do his own talking. Of course, everybody knows that Christianity was, of course, rooted in Judaism, of course, so I guess there's a Jewish connection there, but I'll let Shmuel do his own talking.
Well, he introduced me, and I'm going to introduce somebody to Rabbi Simon now. Now, this person is the Son of God. He's born of a virgin. His birthday is December 25th. His birthday is foretold by a star. Wise men visit him as a child, bringing him gold, frankincense, and myrrh. He is depicted with long hair and a beard. He turns water into wine. He heals the sick, has 12 disciples, rides in on a donkey while admirers wave branches at him. He is symbolized by bread and wine. He is convicted. He is crucified in the spring. He is resurrected on the third day. And those who take part in his passion are born again. Now, I know who you're thinking, and I know who you think I'm introducing to you, but that's not who I just introduced you to.
Who is it then?
This person is known by many names depending upon the country he's from. He is known by Osiris in Egypt, by Dionysus in Greek, by Mithras in Turkey, by Adonis and Thomas in Syria. All these people share that same storyline. Now,
And these were all pre-Christian.
these were all pre-Christian gods, gods that predated Christianity, and they all, to some extent, filled those part of the story. Now, on Central Avenue, you've probably all seen this sign with a person in the middle and a description and a different expression in Hebrew written in a Torah Hebrew. It doesn't say anywhere on this sign who this person is. It's an assumption as we know who it is. And the message is that this person is the Messiah, the Jewish Messiah. Now, we all know who this is supposed to be. This is supposed to be Jesus. But my question is how do we know that that's who that person is?
I mean, the picture. You're
The
saying,
picture.
is that picture
Yeah, how do we know
authentic?
How do we know that picture describes a Jewish Messiah, Jesus? How do we know this? And moreover, how do we know what happened? Because it seems to be from what I just described to you, that most of the events in his life sound like they fit in a pagan god of the time. Well, the most obvious answer would be, it would be one of the books of the New Testament. The New Testament, we have Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. We have the letters of Paul. We have Corinthians and many other books that compose the New Testament, which seem to describe his life. And there is even a possibility that we may have an image of him. This is from the Shroud of Turin, which is claimed by many to be a image burned on the shroud when he died. Notice the face, the beard, the long hair. I didn't bring the full length, which would actually show the crucifixion marks, but it seems to be that we might actually have a historical book saying what happened to him, and maybe even a picture. So why would I even bother to question the New Testament? Why would I bother to question the Shroud of Turin? Interestingly enough, I'm not the first one to question this. Not only 100 years ago was this question, but from the very beginning. When Christianity began, it had an attempt to try to destroy all the records which opposed it. But one of the things that they did is they wrote a lot of books about this to try to get rid of the heresies and get rid of the detractors. So we can see what the detractors said by the attack against them. Now I'm going to quote from a famous pagan philosopher by the name of Celis. And what he has to say about Christianity is this. Many of the ideas of the Christians have been expressed better and earlier by the Greeks. Behind these views is an ancient doctrine that has existed from the beginning. And even more, he even says even clearer. Are these, the distinct happenings, unique to Christians? And if so, how are they unique? Are ours to be accounted as myth and theirs belief? What reasons do the Christians give for the distinctness of their beliefs? And in truth, there is nothing at all unusual about what the Christians believe, except that they believe it in exclusion of any other religion. So what Celis is telling us is that the basis of Christianity, the dying and resurrecting God, most of the stories of Christianity really come from the pagan religions of the time. Now, we're used to seeing...
Yeah, I think people many times, that's what you have the Christmas season, and I mean the Christian theologians agree to that also.
Yeah, the December...
it's not an anti-Christian idea. The real theologians will say the idea that
the
December 25th isn't really
is an arbitrary date, but there's a reason why they took that 25th. Because the 25th was the birthday of Mithras. It was the birthday of Solus Invictus. But now we're going to take a look at actual representations of Christ. He was not always portrayed with a beard like we know him. In the earliest days, he was actually portrayed as a youth. This is a picture of him at his baptism, a picture of him enthroned. And if you look at the similarities between him and a picture of Apollo, they both have a halo. They're both portrayed as a young youth. And also the earliest scenes in the catacombs of Rome, he's portrayed as a youth, a young, caring one, raising the dead, feeding the multitudes, healing the sick. Well, the reason why he was portrayed in that way is because that's the way Apollo was portrayed, as the sun god. Notice this is a picture found in the catacombs. He's on the chariot. He has the halo, just like Apollo has the chariot and the halo. Another depiction that you find him in is when he does his miracles, it's actually with a wand. This is the raising of Lazarus, two different versions of that. And the reason why that is because the gods and the magicians of the time would use a wand as well. This is a picture from vases of Greece where Hermes is shown with his magic wand. Another portrayal is as the healing god. This is a picture of Asclepius. This was a religion which celebrated. They would go into his temple, spend the night, and they would come up with a miraculous cure. This is how it's portrayed, with an open chest, with a beard. This is also a picture of Jesus in the same way, curing the leper. Notice the exact comparison. This is going to be a little bit shocking.
Oh.
Not terribly shocking, but quite interesting. Now here's 3 different representations. If you actually look at these pictures, you'll notice wide hips, you'll notice an enlarged chest in each one of these things. He's actually portrayed as an androgynous god. And the reason why he was portrayed that way is if we look, we have pictures of Apollo wearing a dress with the wide hips and the enlarged chest, and also Seraphis, a god from Egypt, with the breast and the hips.
But these are all conjecture because no one really knows.
We're getting to that.
Right.
We'll continue with the conjecture, and then we'll see what the Christians actually had to say about this.
Yeah.
And one of the more famous pictures, you have the Virgin Mary with Jesus and the angels around. But if we also look over here, a picture of Dionysus and Hermes, you see the same thing. The halo, the baby, holding the cloth with people making the announcement. And the virgin birth is actually a very ancient thing. I seem to have forgotten my pictures of Isis and Horus, but you would see the same thing. But if we go to the Temple of Luxor from 1700 years before Christ, you'll see the same pattern. The God announces to the mother has a divine conception, she gives birth to the divine child, and the child is praised. And we'll give a few more examples of this. We have the Good Shepherd, Jesus with the lamb around him, repeated many, many times. But we also see the same thing with Apollo and with Hermes. Now, Rabbi Simon asked the question. We'll do one more thing. Here's a picture of Socrates, and here's a picture of Jesus with his disciples, the same imagery. And we'll give one last one. An obvious Christian reference, the crucifixion. There could be no more of a greater symbol of Christianity than the crucifixion. But when we look, we see the same thing here. We see a picture of Bacchus, we see a picture of Isis, and we see a picture of Dionysus, all being crucified. Now, Rabbi Simon asked the question, maybe this is just conjecture. Maybe I'm seeing something that's not really there.
Well,
So
why is it they do that to the Old Testament also? They give a picture of Moses. How do they know how they... Moses looked over here. You could say the same thing. And then nowadays you see, you go to black churches and they show him as a black
Yes,
man.
yes.
Which may be more correct, because if an Israeli wasn't your white Caucasian,
Oh.
I mean, again, he probably
Well,
could have had darker skin.
we don't know
over here.
exactly how he would look, but what we do know is we do know the reason why he was portrayed. And the reason he was portrayed in this way was to sort of usurp each one of these pagan gods. They wanted to take control of the religion. They wanted Christianity to be the religion of the empire. So they portrayed him as a magician. They portrayed him as a philosopher. They portrayed him as the young, vital sun god. They portrayed him as the dying and saving god. They portrayed him as the healing god. They wanted to portray him in all the different ways so there would be no reason for any other religion. You wanted healing? You come to him. You want philosophy? You come to him. But this could be my conjecture. I might be seeing things in the picture. So the question is how did the church respond to these similarities with their religion and with the pictures? And it's very interesting to see how they respond to it. One of the early church fathers by the name of Tertullian responds like this: the devil, whose business it is to pervert the truth, mimics the exact circumstances of the divine sacraments. He baptizes his believers and promises forgiveness of sins, and thereby initiates them into the religion of Mithras. Thus he celebrates the obligation of bread and brings in the symbols of the resurrection. Let us therefore acknowledge the craftiness of the devil, who copies certain things of those that be divine. The church fathers, I have other ones if you're interested in hearing them, but they all recognized the problem. And they all had to answer it. And the only answer that they could give was, this is a trick by the devil. No, we were first, we're the real thing, and that the pagans copied us. They answered it the other way around. And the truth is that all these symbolisms were first by the pagans. What would you say is the most recognized Christian symbol?
The cross.
The cross. Now, if we look here in the necklace that's being worn by King Ashur-Nasir-Pal,
Where's he from?
this is from Assyria. You're talking thousands of years before. His necklace is a cross. If you look at this image of Bacchus, he has a cross on him. If you look in Egypt, you would see them wearing the cross. The cross is a symbol of the turning of the seasons. The sun, it's a symbol of the sun god. What's the other biggest Christian symbol, would you say? Probably this, which most people have seen on cars.
The fish.
The fish. Well, most people would say that the fish is an abbreviation because the word for fish in Greek has the same beginning letters as Jesus Christ, the Son of God, the Savior.
Really? That's where it's from?
That's what it's from. But there's something very interesting about this. It's also known as something called the ratio of the fish. That this was known to the pagan philosophers, which I have seemed to have misplaced here.
There you go.
When you put two circles together, you come up with this symbol of a fish. And actually, strangely enough, in the story of the gospel, when they go fishing, Simon Peter climbed aboard and dragged the net ashore. It was full of large fish, 153. If you look at the ratio, what's called the ratio of the fish, it's 265 over 153.
Well, I understand why.
It's a mathematical ratio. It solves various things. But if you look at the mathematical ratio, it's 265 over 153. When the story is told on the sea, catching the miracle of the fish they caught a number, and the number is 153, which is part of this mathematical ratio that Archimedes developed called the ratio of the fish. So it's really not a Christian symbol. It's actually a pagan symbol from Archimedes and from Pythagoras. Now, it almost sounds like there's a little bit of deception going on here. We're being presented something as if it's true, and there's a little bit of something sneaky going on here. Now, if you would go back to Paul, who's one of the early disciples, he has something very interesting to say. For the truth of God hath more abounding by my lie unto his glory. Why yet am I judged a sinner? Paul is very clear that whatever means I have to use to promote this message, I'm going to use. And we could go through various other of the church fathers who have a similar meaning. Now, we have portrayed this in pictures so far. So the question is when we actually get to read the New Testament, how does this, if it was a story that was sort of generated, sort of a fable, what would we expect to see when we actually go into the historical workings of the New Testament? What would we expect to find? You find something interesting. When you actually look at Paul, who is the earliest documents, he has 80,000 words in his letters. And you know what you don't find there? You don't find when he lived. You don't find where he lived. You don't find when he died. You don't find where he died. They don't mention his mother, his father, his teachings, his miracles, his entry into Jerusalem. Nothing. Not one teaching. He even claims, I received nothing as a teaching from the disciples. As if he mentions nothing historical. All he says is, he died, he was resurrected, and that's all he mentions. Nothing else. Nothing. And when we actually go to the Gospels, you find something completely unbelievable. You would expect that if they were eyewitness accounts, when you would expect them to describe a journey or a region, what would you expect to find there? When they're describing on a trip, when they're going from this place to this place, what would you expect? That it would actually fit the geography.
Right, sure, of course.
Sure, okay. Now, here's a typical journey. And he left the vicinity of Tyre and went through Sidon down to the Galilee. Tyre, Sidon, down to the Galilee. We're going in the wrong direction. If you would have to go Sidon, Tyre, and then to the Galilee. This is the exact opposite direction. Now, it's been proposed maybe that there was no road from Tyre into the Galilee, although this map clearly shows that that's the way. But we can even go back to an ancient map from the 12th century, clearly shows the road is not from Sidon but from Tyre. Now, another interesting geographical point. Now, there's a famous story. And they came over to the other side of the sea into the country of Gadarnus. Now there was nigh unto the mountains a great herd of swine feeding, and all the devils besought unto him, saying, Send us into the swine, that we may enter into them. And forthwith Jesus gave them leave. And the unclean spirit went out, and entered into the swine, and the herd ran violently down a steep place into the sea. Now, there's no city near the coast. There's no high hill. And my other question is, what are a herd of swine doing in a country that doesn't eat pig? There's something seriously wrong with the story. I mean, we have several other instances. I'll give you one more instance. And they came to Jericho, and they went out of Jericho, and his disciple and a great number of people. And they came nigh unto Jerusalem, to Bethphage and Bethany to Jerusalem. But the order of the cities is Bethany, Bethphage, and Jerusalem. The order is wrong.
So what does that conclude? That really someone who doesn't know?
That concludes that this was not done by people who actually knew the story. Because they
It was very much later. The whole story was
very much
later.
Details, historical details were added on. We have a basis. We know we have a story that we want to have. We know we have details. We know we want him to be born of a virgin. We know we want him to be crucified. We know we have certain details. And then we began to add parts of the story onto that. But every time that there's any sort of historical detail given, it's wrong. I mean, if we would go into basic details, if we would talk about when was he born? When was he born? So Luke gives us this information. He says, And it came to pass in those days that there was a decree from Caesar Augustus that all the world should be taxed. And this thing was made when Cyrenius was the governor of Syria. And all went to be taxed, every one into his own city. And Joseph also went from the Galilee, out of the city of Nazareth, into Judea, unto the city of David, which is called Bethlehem. Now this would all have to take place during Herod the Great. The problem is that Cyrenius did not become the governor in Syria until after Herod the Great would have already had to die. Not only that, the only reason you have a census in Rome is to establish taxation. Under Herod the Great, he was a client kingdom. He had a set tax to the Roman people, which had nothing to do with the population. It was not a head count. Even after Herod died, the Galilee, where he was supposedly coming from, was not run by the Romans either. So for any account, this event could not have happened when they say they don't know the information in this. Now, one of the reasons why this happened is if we would look at the actual evidence of what we have, we don't find a single scrap of manuscript until almost the year 200. And that little scrap, if I don't have a picture of it, would be about like this big. It's never even quoted by any of the church leaders till almost 120, 130. Nobody ever mentions this as if it ever happened. They don't know when it happened. I mean, the other letters, for example, the letter of James, the letter of Jude, the letter of John, they all talk about him, but they don't talk about him as if he ever walked on this earth. They don't know when it happened. They don't know how it happened. And if this was an event that happened 30 years ago, where is all the information? They could have walked into Israel and asked. They could have asked. Some of these people Paul could have walked and said, "Hello, Mary. Tell me about your son." He never mentions it. Nobody ever talks about it. They never ask about it. And if this religion started out with one person, within 300 years of it, you have countless versions of it. Was he the Son of God? Was he not the Son of God? Was he born of a virgin? Was he not born of a virgin? Is he equal to God? Is he not equal to God? These were fights that ranged throughout history very violently. There was even a famous council.
Amongst the Christians themselves, you mean?
Yes. There's a famous quote. Everyone's used it before, but they don't know where it comes from. It's called, "Kill them all and let God sort them out." That actually comes from the Cathars. The Cathars were a group of people living in France, and they had a little bit of a heresy, and they didn't believe in the pure divinity, and they certainly didn't accept the Catholic Church. So the Catholic Church called them heretics, came in and killed every single one of them, man, woman, and children, because of this difference of beliefs. But early on, you had the Gnostics. You had the Markians, you had the Manichaeans, you had group after group after group. It seems very unlikely that if there was one teacher with one 12 group of disciples, and one became the Pope, and then one Pope to the next Pope to the next Pope, you would have had really one solid group of people, not group after group after group contending that their
ideas are the right thing.
There's the actual thing. Now, we showed you the sign on Central Avenue. Now here's a close-up. The question is, who's who? This is a picture from the sign, and this is a picture of Seraphis, an Egyptian god. Notice the similarities, to the point where you can almost not recognize who's who. So,
there was a problem, I guess, with these ideas when Jewish people, I guess, I always find that many of these Christian groups, they're sincere in their own right for Christians.
There's a very big difference between belief and proof. By all means, I have no intention of shaking anyone's faith. Everyone has the right to believe whatever they believe. And belief is something that's outside of proof. But as a historian or as a Jew, we have to look at the proof. And for us, we just don't see that. But it's of course not meant as any kind of attack. And there's a great deal of Christians who recognize these historical problems. There's even books. One book written called A Marginal Jew. He comes to the conclusion that we don't have historical information, but we have to accept it on belief. That's what they believe. But for us, we have a different approach to it.
Right. Well, it's important, I mean, just for our Jewish viewers, you know, when they get caught up, I mean, of course, I always say learn about Judaism first if you're a Jewish person, and then you'll have a solid background on what Judaism really is. You won't have to look anywhere else. And like you say, a lot of Christians, they understand nowadays, I think more and more, that the roots are rooted in Judaism and looking back and seeing where everything has come from.
That would be a whole other discussion as to if really they're so close to, they have all these connections with paganism, then why do they have the connection with Judaism?
Right.
That's a whole other discussion, but in brief, they needed the connection to Judaism because a new religion was not acceptable under Roman law. They needed the connection with Judaism. They wanted those connections with Judaism. It established their antiquity, and it gave them, their roots really were in Judaism. And it only later became more pagan under the influence of Constantine. He wanted to have it all. He wanted to have the Jewish religion. He also wanted to make this religion not just for one group of people. He wanted to make a universal religion. He thought that the Jews would be part of this. He thought the pagans would be part of this, and there would be world peace. That's what he wanted. He wanted to have something for everybody. That's why he picked this religion that was just outside of Judaism. He thought, well, if I change a little bit, it'll make the non-Jews happy. It'll make the philosophers happy. The Jews will be happy. Therefore, the empire will be at peace, and everything will be good. That's what he wanted. He wanted the ethics which Judaism had, and the pagans didn't have. He wanted the mystery and the intrigue and the showmanship of the pagan world, which Judaism didn't have. That's why he put it all together into this thing.
Well, thank you very much, Will. We're out of time, but it's like you say, maybe we'll have to invite you again for some other interesting historical. I mean, you do have a degree. I mean, it's just not here, so I see you did a lot of research. We never said.
It's biblical archaeology, actually.
Biblical archaeology, and you did a lot of research, I could see, in trying to find out the roots for it, and if any Jewish people really want to see, you know, if they have even any doubt of, you know, their Jewish roots or where they should turn, I'm sure they can find out more information.
Absolutely.
And I want to thank you, Shmuel, for being on the Jewish View. Shalom. Welcome to the Jewish View. My name is Rabbi Nachman Simon with the Chabad House of Delmar. We have a very special guest with us today, Miss Michelle Friedman of Tea and Tattered Books. Welcome to the Jewish View, Michelle.
Thank you, Dr. Rabbi Simon.
Listen, I wanted to talk to you. Tea and Tattered Books is a used bookstore.
Yes.
And that's why a little bit has to do with Jewish right away, because people always say the Jewish people are the people of the book.
Exactly.
So Jews and books go together. So I guess that's a good subject for the Jewish View. But you know, personally, how did you get into the used bookstore business?
Well, I had been working in the healthcare administration field, and being in middle management, it's always the first jobs to go, so it wasn't quite as stable as I would have liked it to be. And, you know, I was kind of tired of working for somebody else, so I thought I might as well work for myself, and I've been reading since I was 4 years old, so it seemed to be a natural fit.
That's interesting. Well, you're in Glenmont, so you're local, so practically neighbors about a mile away, and we actually have done nice things in the little subjects and seminars about Jewish subjects right in there. But, you know, let's get down to business. There's how many books are there? I don't know, 10 million books in the world over on the Library of Congress. Well, we can't talk about all of them right now, so we'll have to for another time. But, of course, you know, there's, like I say, so many books on Jewish subjects besides to primary sources, for sure, the Talmud and I mean, if you want to get into the Hebrew libraries, you know, for thousands of years, that also would fill a building up for sure over here. But on top of that, we're talking, you know, down to earth. We're here in Bethlehem, so we're talking about English books that people can understand over there in their own language. But of course, there's so many books
Oh,
you know,
yeah.
and Jewish
Yeah.
ideas over here that really have to deal with. Do you have any specific one that you'd like to talk about? And
Sure.
you know,
The one that really interested me the most, particularly given the time of the year, is Exodus by Leon Uris, and how it relates to the actual exodus of the Jews from Egypt and the exodus from slavery, where the people were in Exodus, the book by Leon Uris, were leaving. In part of the book, they were leaving Russia and the pogroms of Russia in the late 19th century, and they were also leaving Europe and escaping after World War II in the displaced person camps, and going to Israel, and you know how Israel is the center of course,
always the
Jewish
focus.
life.
It's-
Yes, exactly.
They're always exodusing over here. The
Exactly.
Jewish people are always leaving and trying to
Exactly,
get to Israel.
and so there's a lot of a lot of comparison, I believe, in the book of Exodus and the book Exodus.
Very good. So let's start from the beginning over here, the original.
Well, it's really interesting how there's God promised four things. He promised to take the Jews out of Egypt, to deliver them to Israel, to redeem them, and also make them free. And it's really interesting that these same themes keep coming up again and again in the book Exodus by Leon Uris, whereas the Jews are taken out of Europe and they are brought to Israel, and they are redeemed from whatever may have happened to them there. They're being given a new life in Israel, but it's the point of freedom that seems to be the sticking point in both books, actually. Where are we ever really free? Have we ever really freed ourselves and become the people that we need to be?
It's an interesting concept. I can carry it further, actually. It says about, it's actually a phrase in the Talmud when it's talking about the Megillah, the story of Esther, the book of Esther. And so everybody knows, in 10 seconds, a long story short, is just the Jewish people were in Persia, not in slavery, but they were in exile outside the land of Israel after the destruction of the first temple. And then this evil character, Haman, the prime minister, wants to wipe out all the Jews. And miraculously, making a long story short, they were saved. And, so the story ends up the Jewish people lived happily ever after. Their enemies are gone, and they have Esther the queen, and Jewish queen, a Jewish minister like Mordecai. On the other hand, the Talmud says, still we were slaves. We were still in exile. So even though when there's a celebration, Purim today, there's a whole holiday, but it's always a little bit incomplete. It's a very interesting idea that, say, Passover, Purim, so we're always celebrating our freedom or our escape, but it's never fully developed. And that's why the Jewish people are waiting for the Messiah over here to make it a full thing. But it's interesting, like you have to celebrate your incomplete victory, so to speak. You can't wait for, get everything 100%.
Right, and as it relates to Exodus, the book, in the individual character development, they all reach that point, but they still have their demons inside that they're facing up. And a lot of the research that I've done on the book, points to how it was a very forward-thinking book in relation to what's going on in Israel right now, and the same turmoil is also going on in the characters as well. How are they going to relate to each other in this new state of Israel? How are they going to relate to their neighbors? And I think that this also happened in the book of Exodus too, that they left, but they still had to learn how to relate to each other, and also they were still neighbors with Egypt and the surrounding tribes.
It's interesting you're saying about the learning process. Freedom is not so easy. And I actually read, so many years ago, but a sociologist, I thought it was a nice, interesting take, the difference between the Jewish experience from going out of slavery in Egypt compared to the black experience going out after the Civil War or Emancipation Proclamation, but all right, after the Civil War of being free. And it was interesting that the Jewish people had 40 years of, maybe you can call it incubation, meaning left alone, let's develop ourselves until we're ready to go. And then 40 years is a lot of years. It's not, 40 days or 1, 2, 3, where the black people never had that incubation, saying, all right, Civil War, oh, you're free. what do we do? You know, you didn't train us. You know, now there's training programs, there's things like that. And you know, immigrants, I don't know. You know, they have classes there. It's, okay, you're free. Vote. Let's vote. You know, I don't know. I mean, it's been 100 years or 200 years or whatever it was since we're slaves. My grandfather never knew what to be free. My great-grandfather. And therefore, in a little bit, you know, they're still going through these growing pains a little bit. What means freedom? How can I take the initiative? You know, I'm fully, you know, I have self-esteem. You know, I'm a free person where, you know, there are even in, I mean, I think this so many years ago, it was like from the 1960s, just 100 years later, and they're still trying to a growing process where the Jewish people had an incubation of 40 years to, you know, learn how to be free. And, you know, because it is, you know, you think, okay, slave free, and it's nice, you know, but if you're under that mentality for hundreds of years, you know, it isn't automatic. So that's it's an interesting idea where you have to be trained almost to be free. It's an interesting idea. You know, you think you have freedom, you know what you're going to do over here.
Right, but you also brought up the you know, the waiting for the Messiah. There's a freedom of spirit and of soul that, you know, we're all waiting for as well, that we may not, you know, we may not be experiencing it fully yet, that may come in the future.
Yeah, well, now maybe, hopefully it will come, whether it's only when. But, you know, while Israel has, you know, it's interesting you bring this up because I'm thinking because Israel has this situation also, what to do with their freedom, and one of the major ideas which, you know, I love history, that's why I'm saying it's, you know, if you'd have to ask me my best major or something, I'd say it was history, even though Judaism, like I say, takes in all fields of philosophy, legalistic, you know, being a lawyer, you know, because of the Talmud really covers the gamuts, but I love history. And I always contend, I mean, people say it, I mean, it's just a known thing in history, you know, what are you learning about old-fashioned things, but you can't understand the present unless you have a history, so that's the basic line of every historian. I always say that too. You know, people go into the Israeli conflict, I'm saying current events today, and they just jump right into it. And it says, you know, you can't just jump into a subject. You have to know where you're coming from. There's a history there. Then you'll be able to come in there. I mean, at times we have reporters, arguments reporters, they come in, and I've talked to, you know, international people, and they just, you know, you're stationed in London. Okay, London. Then now to Israel, and they're reporting on it. You know, you have to take a course. You know, you can't, and you're talking with authority to people. You know, oh, the reporter says, it says in the newspaper, and these people have as much knowledge of the Middle East, or, you know, they maybe read a few pages, and, you know, really in it to understand and the conflicts that are happening now. There really, it should be, you know, really even I would even say a whole degree in it, you know, a Middle Eastern history before you can rightfully talk about or report on a situation. Or, I mean, that goes for Europe also, in Bosnia, I don't know, you know, whatever situation you can bomb in, and all of a sudden, okay, now I'm talking about Bosnia and the Yugoslavian problem, you know, what's happening there. So I just think, you know, it is all, like you say, it is all a very interesting stream of events that are ultimately connected. I think Israel also with the Arab conflict, they didn't, you know, just to how to work out their freedom of how they're going to deal with what kind of government they're going to have. So many different conflicts between Arabs and Jews, and then you have in Jews itself, secular and religious. So they're still, you know, I mean, it's 50, pushing it 60 years later, about 60 years, and they're still groping with these same problems. That's why I say with the blacks, I mean, you think you're away, you know, in time from the problem 100 years ago, but you're still groping with issues, you know, 100 years, 150 years, 60 years later, and if you didn't, you know, finally decide on the course of action, you know, problems just don't go away because of time. If anything, they exasperate. Like I say, in the 60s, the blacks rioted, and here you see with Israel, they're still dealing with a situation, and, you know, things get worse. If anything, they don't just fade away.
Right. No, and going back to, you know, reading up on the history of a place, it was recommended to me before I went to Israel that I read Exodus, and I also, the other book that was recommended that I read is the one by James Michener, The Source, which is a real good book that shows kind of the progression of events leading to the Jewish people. And I highly recommend particularly Exodus for people to read that before they go to Israel, because I think people go with some preconceived notions about the way things are there without really understanding where they came from. And Exodus is a really good book that gives a real good history of what is going on.
Yeah, I know that even in a more limited, I totally agree with what you're saying, but a limited framework, Israel's so based on the Holocaust. I mean, they also, Yad Vashem, there's a Holocaust memorial there, but knowing, where the attitude that was born out of the Holocaust. I mean, you're right, it's on a bigger framework of thousands and thousands of years, but even that small framework, people just don't understand. Again, I think even Israel, they're fighting for their lives, and I mean, they are number one fighting for their lives. They have this kind of attitude, but they also came from the Holocaust attitude where if we don't stick up for ourselves, no one else will.
Right.
So they make some more radical decisions militarily and say, oh, what are you getting so aggressive about? And what are you going? So they have, you have to understand where people are coming from in order to understand them. And again, it's just like this kind of, again, knowing the history where they say Holocaust, no one was there, when we needed help, you don't have any allies. And Israel ultimately feels that way. I mean, America's their ally, but is America going to send soldiers there to help them out?
Right.
They're in a doubt. Sometimes they do, and sometimes they don't over here. So you never know. So it's important, to know the situation.
Yes, it is. It's very important, and again, that's what I recommend. But I make lots of recommendations in the shop all the time.
Yeah.
Based
People do ask you, it's interesting,
yeah.
what to read over here.
Well, for some reason, people seem to think that I've read every book that's on my shelves. And
You're
of
a
course,
librarian
yeah,
over here,
with
somebody.
10,000 books, I've just had all the time in the world to read all of those books. And unfortunately, it's not true. But I've read a good number of them, and I can usually make a good recommendation or two.
That's interesting. So that's how many books you have, 10,000?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And you're expanding, or that's kind of...
Always expanding. Always expanding.
Well, there's room over there.
Oh,
Ultimately, you
plenty
gotta
of
be
room,
full.
yes. Yes.
You have room there.
There's always plenty of room and plenty of space for people to sit and read or talk with each other and drink tea and socialize. And I'm always available to talk to as well, or
Yeah.
almost always available.
To look for good books over there.
Mhm.
Well, I think that's a service. I mean, a little bit, I mean, there's nothing, not your fault. I'm not blaming you, but sometimes I see books. I mean, that's why we're in a library, studios in a library, and I mean, that's why they made libraries at the beginning to cut down the cost. But, I always, use books also. People can't get a hold of books, and they're really expensive. That's what I'm trying to bring out. I'm not,
Yes.
I mean, maybe it's inflation, and, I'm not blaming anything, but bottom line, you have young people who want to read,
Yeah.
and it's just difficult to, pay those kind of prices
Oh,
sometimes.
sure,
That's what it is.
sure.
It's-
And if then the libraries are great. I still use the library from time to time myself. It's just that you have to have the book back in 3 weeks.
Yeah.
Whereas you come to Tea and Tattered Pages and you don't need to have the
Yeah.
book back. It's your book, and then you can bring it in and you can trade it in and towards new books, and keep the stock rotating through as opposed
No,
to
it's-
sitting in your house.
Yeah, no, I think it's a good thing over here because I know I've been also like that. I don't have that much time for every kind of book, and then then all of a sudden I got to give back, and I'm halfway done, but I have to run it back so this
Mhm.
way you can take your time about it. So, it's an important point. I think. I mean, you feel there's a big niche. I mean,
Oh,
people
yeah.
come in and
Yeah.
because there's obviously there's new bookstores to say the least.
Oh,
Those
yeah.
are bigger over here, but
Yeah,
there's
but
a big niche.
there's definitely a niche down there. There really isn't anything in the Glenmont area. And Greenville, I get a lot of, not Greenville, Greene County. I get a lot of people who come up from Greene County because there really is not a lot retail-wise down there. And these people are just starving for books and for a place to go and to sit and read and commune with books.
Yeah, no, I think that's important. I mean, it is an important factor because I remember I had Theodore Bickel so many years ago, but again, and he was bemoaning, I remember, what he was saying about the high price of theater. He's saying, well, again, in different venues that they say that, I mean, a little bit they're saying with baseball games also, so it's sports also, is, you can live on it, but what about the youth? Your only future is with the youth, and if you're going to box them out because of prices, eventually, or
Right.
you have a good thing going now, and he was bemoaning theater. He says, you're not getting the youth going to Broadway. They can't afford such prices. So
Right.
it's nice that you're making money now, but look down the pike, and if people aren't interested when they're young, all of a sudden 40, 50 years old,
Right.
people don't read books. I mean, I would assume, not a educational PhD, but, people didn't read books till they're 40, you know, if they're young, like you said, 4 years old, you're into books. You got to give it to kids when they're young. There's a lot of programs like that,
Right.
even here in the Bethlehem Library, literacy for children, because, you know, it's obvious, 40 years old, all of a sudden, oh, I'm into reading.
Right.
You're not going to get that many people if they're into it when they're young. So it's interesting. That's why I say with books also, you know, you're not going to get kids interested in books if, you know, it becomes so.
Well, I had thought
You know,
that I
so
would
expensive.
find that children were not interested in books, but I have so many kids who come in and they know the authors that they're looking for. They're reading series of books. They really do enjoy reading. And sometimes I'll even say to the parents, who does the child get this from, mom or dad? And they're like, they have no idea because the child has just picked it up themselves and they really like to read. So it's, you know.
But they're coming to you because you use bookstore.
Right,
'cause it's not that
exactly.
expensive. Well, that's what I'm saying.
Exactly.
You're a necessary outlet because to pay $25, $35
Yes.
a crack, parents aren't going to do
No,
that either.
no.
So that's what I'm saying. It's an important. That's exactly
Right,
what I'm saying.
right.
You fill up a big gap, I think, for people that make things, you know, books accessible. You know, I'm not saying you're in for business, but I'm just saying it's good for the community at large.
Yes,
It's a
yes.
needed thing where you're helping people read, and that's all important.
Right. Well,
I
and
don't
there's
think
something.
people read enough. They say, I don't know how you feel, but you read about newspapers are going downhill. I don't know if that's because of the internet. I mean, there's obviously a
think
big
so.
discussion about that. You know,
Yeah,
they don't
and
need
it's
that.
really interesting how the electronic books, you know, the devices to read books electronically, so far they haven't really caught on.
I heard that. Why do you think that is?
I don't know. There's just something about holding a book and turning the pages and, you know, and picking it up and putting it down, you know, and having a bookmark marking your spot. There's just something about it that it
Just
feels
doesn't come
better. You know, it
Yeah.
just, it kind of, it ties you in with the ages and, you know, it just makes you feel better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you could read anywhere else. I mean, you know, like if people don't have a laptop, also you want to sit in your easy chair. You know.
Right, right. But
It
they
just
come
doesn't
out with
make it, yeah.
devices, actually, that you can just hold in your hand. But
Just
they
doesn't
just haven't,
go.
yeah, it's not the same as turning those pages with your
Yeah.
hand.
Yeah, I heard someone said that it just doesn't go. I didn't know what their official take is over here. You know, it just didn't. Because
Yeah,
it would
but
be
so
cheaper on
far-
one hand, but just if you don't like
Yeah.
it, you don't like it.
Yeah,
it just
and
doesn't
so
go.
far they have not taken off. You know.
Those electronic
Yeah,
books.
it's a very interesting thing, and I'm sure that there's people who are doing, you know, research
Yeah.
and papers on it. But I just, you know, for my sake, I kind of hope that
Yeah.
they never take off.
Yeah. Well, you can research all you want. It just doesn't go. It doesn't go. You know,
Right,
certain things
right.
just don't make it in people's minds, and they have to
Right.
switch to something else over here.
Right.
Is there any subject that people, you know, like you'd say, a one subject that people are more interested? I mean, you know, because I've been in your store, but obviously, like any bookstore, it's subdivided into different subjects. You think fiction, nonfiction? Or?
Well, most people tend to like fiction, and mysteries are a huge seller. You know, like Clara
Yeah,
loves
my wife
loves
does that.
mysteries.
And I don't like that's we're funny people. We're on the most important things. We're on the same page, and other things, secondary things, we're totally different people over there. And I just do not like fiction. I just gobble up real story. I like the truth, you know, and stuff like that.
Yes, history does sell very well too. As you mentioned that you like history. History sells very well too. I have people coming through, and I just don't have near enough history books to satisfy
Really?
the need. So if anybody would like to bring them in, I would be more than happy to talk about some trade credit for those.
You get anything with CDs, or you don't get into like we were talking about electronics?
I
Anything,
do.
anything?
I do. There are a lot of people who they travel for their job, so they like books on tape and books on CD, and so I do carry a selection of those as well. I also have a selection of large print books for people who have sight problems, and I pretty much carry everything. I consider everything that's brought to me for trade. Yeah, there's very few times that I will say no to something, except if I have a few copies of it on the shelf.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You don't
because I
have
want to
so
keep room for other things.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting over here. So, is there any other expansions you think? I mean, like through mail order or anything? I mean,
Well,
to be
my
bigger?
website is up, www.tandtattered.com, and hopefully within the next year I'll be able to sell books off of my website as well, have a shopping cart feature, so that people can buy books from the website. But if somebody would like to send a book to somebody, they're more than welcome to, ask me, or even a college student, if there's something, they're away at school and they want me to reserve a book for them and it comes in, I will be more than happy to send it to them when it comes in.
And you have everything categorized on, enough to be
Yes.
on computer?
Yes, I have all of my inventory on my hard drive. And
that's pretty good.
yeah. And I mean, it's been a huge task, but I was
Well,
told
most used books, is that a new thing, or you're pretty unique in used books?
it's pretty unique in used books. Most people don't.
Yeah, they just say, I don't think that they have
Yeah,
that.
they have to depend on the owner's memory for what's on the shelf. But I was advised by other used bookstore owners that if they had to do it all over again, that they would have an inventory, so that they
So
knew.
you could do that. I mean, this way, they can't say yes for a book. You can just show everybody what you have.
Exactly.
Surely it's
exactly.
good for the, websites are so important now,
Yes. Yes. So, I'm looking to expand, on the electronic marketplace, and also always looking for, more books, new authors.
That's an interesting thing, because usually you're always a store comes, okay, this is what I can offer. But like you're saying, it's a two-way street a little bit, so I want you, taking in books.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, no, it's definitely a two-way street because, I couldn't continue my inventory and keep growing my inventory if people weren't bringing me books as well. And it works both ways. It's a trade-off. I give trade credit in exchange. I'll give between 15 and 20% of the publisher's price back in credit that could be used towards 50% of future purchases, so everybody wins. So there's a little bit of cash flowing into the store so that I can keep the lights on and stay available for people to come into the store and purchase books, but people are also getting my already discounted prices for half price against their
Yeah.
trade credit account.
Oh, so that's excellent over here. So that's why, so it's a two-way street. That's important. For my wife also, I think any person who reads, I mean, if they like books on
Yes.
one hand, then they already have books at home. And if they're saying, hey, look, this is a book, I'm never going to open it up again. It was a nice book. But, it's just taking up shelf space. Why don't I
Right.
trade it in and get a different book? And it's not even going to cost them that much already. So,
Right.
like I
Well,
say.
it was kind of eye-opening when I helped my mom move out of her house into an apartment, and there were just boxes and boxes of books. She had, my father's books from when he passed away, and that she never got rid of over the years, and she had all of her books, and it just, somebody has to clean it out eventually, so you might as well bring
Get
it
something
someplace
for
and
it,
get
yeah.
something for it. Yeah.
No, I think that's important. I mean, people just don't, they even ask me for, which I do with books. And, you don't want to throw those things away, because
Right.
when people, like you say, read, they make some kind of bond with it, and just to throw away
Right,
a book or
right.
something. I know my mother's 35 years, she was a kindergarten teacher in a public school. I'm from Chicago. And she, sometimes there was some rule in the Chicago public school that I think 10 years, don't quote me on it, but whatever, they had to get rid of math books. She said, well, math, hey, she said, science, I know science, but 2 + 2 is 4. What does that make a difference to a, second,
Right,
third grade
right.
book? I mean, a book's a book, and what changes, but that was the rule because they felt they have new way, new math, new this.
Right.
And she says it would rip her heart out. And they take textbooks, decent ones,
Right.
and just, rules are rules, and they dump them out. Just, it would rip me up over here, So I think that's what any person, even I, books, I just hold on to them, so I'm not going to read it. It's taking up spell, but to throw away a book,
Right.
you just
It's very
don't want to
difficult.
do it. So at least first of all, you're getting credit for it. Someone else is going to read it, so it makes it a lot easier over here to do that. over here.
Yes, yes, exactly, exactly. So.
Well, I want to thank Michelle. We're running out of time, but there's another million books, so we can talk about another million shows over here. I mean, whatever. So we will, as Michelle, come back, and it's always good. I love books. I mean, like I say, Jewish people are the people of the book over here. They say in Israel, the book fair is like incredible. That's what you can imagine over there. People like reading. Everybody loves reading. So, I mean, like I say, two-way street. You have books, go over there to T&T Edward Books in Glenmont. Number 2, pick up a book. And this way we all love talking about books. And, there's, surely with the Jewish view, we can always find some kind of
Oh, absolutely.
Jewish kind of take on there. There's always something that's going on. I mean, Jewish books are, we can do Holocaust literature. I mean, there's really so much that it can be talked about over here that I just know that, that's why I get frustrated also. Like you say, you'd like to read every book, but, it just doesn't happen. Obviously, you need 100 lifetimes nowadays.
Exactly, exactly.
There are more books today probably than ever before. Just one last note I think
Probably,
about.
yeah.
It's just, I mean, the knowledge is incredible. That's why I'm thinking, what did they have to learn like 500 years ago or something like that?
Well, not only that, but just the options for getting published are so vast today, because you don't really need to wait for a publisher to decide that they want to print your book. You can self-print your book, self-publish your own book. Right, you have to put money out, but some people are willing to do that, and some people have been very successful at it as well.
Just doing it themselves.
Mm-hmm. And so, there's just so many different options, and that just gets all of this information out there. Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you again, Michelle Friedman, for coming on to Jewish View and talking about your used bookstore. And hopefully, we'll come again, and we'll be able to talk about another few books.
Great.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
Shalom, welcome to the Jewish View. My name is Rabbi Nachman Simon with the Chabad House of Delmar, and we have our very special regular guest with us today. This is Mark Ronich with the statewide news service. Welcome, Mark, back to the Jewish View.
Thank you for having me back. It's
this
great.
Is television, not radio, but all right. I mean, I'm sure you can transfer your media from one thing to another. You're good on camera.
And I service radio stations around the state with customized news from the Capitol.
Very good.
And I did that from 1981 to 96, took a little break, and now I'm back doing it again, round 2.
Yeah.
And it's a lot of fun. And I really had a good start when Governor Spitzer said day one, and day one everything changes. Day one for me was the day one of the administration, also January 1st. That's when I restarted, yes.
So you're together with the governor. Well, you know, there's never a lack for news around Albany, you know, with the states. I'm sure you're constantly busy. There's always some, you know, doings over here, you know, some political ideas. But, you know, we're on the Jewish View, and of course, is Jewish, so I mean, we've had, and you have actually brought politicians, and obviously a Jewish person works in the world, so you care about no matter who is the governor, who's the mayor, who's the assembly person, you know, they're representing us. But here we're very special. Now we actually have a Jewish governor in the state, so we can actually tie it really directly to the Jewish View. This is the first governor, or
no,
what's the history of New York State?
Herbert Lehman was the first Jewish governor.
All right.
And it's amazing in a state that has so many Jewish residents, mainly downstate, but throughout the state, that we've only had 2 Jewish governors. This is the second one. Herbert Lehman was in office during the 1950s. No, 30s, 40s, yeah, in that range. Yeah, it was a long time ago, 60 some odd years ago.
And now we have finally.
And now we have another. But you know, some people say he's a Gino, Jew in name only, because he's, you know, he has not. I found this out through various sources, including through the governor's press office, also confirmed it. But the governor never had a bar mitzvah.
Really?
Now, you know, some people say, and you can confirm this for me or not, but you don't really need to have a bar mitzvah. It's a ceremony, it's pomp and circumstance, but I always thought that you at least had to be called up for an aliyah on your 13th birthday to make it official. Other people have told me since that you just have to turn 13 and you're automatically a bar mitzvah. Now, how does that...
That's true. I mean, bar mitzvah means that you're obligated in the mitzvahs. Just like, for example, you can have your driver's license at 16. So what if you don't have it at 16? You didn't lose any privileges. You have the right to do things. So in a bar mitzvah, it's just that people always do, because if they have the first possibility, you know, I mean, to get driving, it's like, oh, I got to drive on my 16th birthday, or I have to have a drink on my 21st birthday. Of course, you have the right to do it, but, you know, a Jewish person should want to do it. You know, if you have the ability, the privilege to do something, hey, wow, first opportunity, I'm going to do it. The parents should want that for their children. The children should want it for themselves. That's why it's done. Unfortunately, again, a lot of cases that parents don't care about it, and the children, you know, obviously the parents don't care about it, the children aren't going to care that much either. It's just, so therefore, the second opinion is right. It's really not needed. What happens is it's just, if you say the pride of being Jewish, I mean, obviously that's what I'm saying. What happens, not so much legalistic, but what kind of attitude do they have that they just didn't say, you know, I'm not saying that the bar mitzvah is the end all, because a lot of kids have their bar mitzvah, okay, I finished, I'm not done with being Jewish, and let me go on with life. Unfortunately, that's also a big attitude, but shows that the parents didn't care enough to belong to any affiliation and give the child any Hebrew school education, and that's really what it kind of shows on a lack of Jewish pride in their own, or actually obviously a lack of Jewish education, because they don't know that much. So how can you live like a good Jew if you don't have the Jewish education? That's pretty much more what it looks upon.
Well, also what was sort of striking for me was the fact that the first place that the governor had a ceremony was at a Presbyterian church on State Street in Albany. It wasn't, you know, he could have just as easily, I suppose, gone to a congregation Beth Emeth if he wanted to go to any synagogue. You know, that wasn't that close. And Herbert Lehman used to attend high holiday services at Beth Emeth when he was governor. But again, in the 30s, the governor, it's a different time. You know, you didn't have easy travel as you do today. You know, the travel wasn't as easy back then. Go back and forth to New York, or to go, you know, to go back to your hometown. I mean, basically, governors back then really did live in the mansion. They lived in Albany. This was their hometown. So, and I'm not even sure that Beth Emeth was on Academy Road at the time. Yeah. They might have been downtown.
Right down a few blocks away.
Right. So, but I know that Rabbi Scott Speen, the rabbi of Congregation Beth Emeth, told me that he extended an invitation to Governor Spitzer to attend high holiday services at his synagogue to continue the tradition of Jewish governors attending high holiday services.
What did the governor respond?
No answer yet, but you know, it was in the midst of many letters that the governor got, so maybe they're weeding through it. You know,
well, you think? I mean, you know, it's like funny because you know, people say, you know, some senators, whoever they are they friendly to Jews? I said, listen, New York State. You know, my political take is, you know, if you're in New York State, you know, you have to go to some bagel fest, or, you know what I'm saying, some Israeli parade. I mean, that just, whether you're Jewish or non-Jewish.
Well,
I mean, that just comes with the thing. So
well, you
would think maybe just for the outward services, hey, I'm Jewish, what are people going to say? Yom Kippur, you're working, you know? What are you, in the office, Yom Kippur? So whether he's religious in feeling or not, just from the attitude.
But it goes beyond that. Now, right after the inauguration in January, our world-class Jewish weekly newspaper, The Jewish World,
right.
I wrote this back page story, and they used as the headline, "Ethnicity Seen Irrelevant in Rise of Spitzer."
That was your words or their words?
No, that was their words. My words was, being Jewish just doesn't matter anymore. Really? That was my suggested title, because everyone who I spoke to for this article here, whether it was, you know, the mayor of New York City, who's Jewish, or it was a congressman who's Jewish, or it was an elected official who wasn't Jewish, like Albany Assemblyman Jack McEnany, you know, whether I spoke to a Reform rabbi or an Orthodox rabbi, they all said it just doesn't matter whether he's Jewish. His ethnicity, his religion, it just doesn't. It matters whether he's going to be a good governor. it doesn't matter whether he's Jewish. So my headline would have been, being Jewish just doesn't matter anymore.
Yeah.
If it doesn't matter, it doesn't matter. And, you know,
Yeah.
if you're speaking to the people inside the community, and they're saying it doesn't matter, then it just doesn't matter anymore. And, you know, I know that you know, our previous governor, George Pataki, was very proud of his Hungarian heritage and promoted that quite a bit while he was governor. Before him, Mario Cuomo was extremely proud of his Italian heritage. I mean, you saw that everywhere. Even in his speeches, he would throw in some Italian words. And before him, Hugh Carey was very proud of his Irish heritage. I remember one time Hugh Carey and U.S. Senator Daniel Patrick Moynihan, may he rest in peace, they were both singing When Irish Eyes Are Smiling a cappella at the Empire State Plaza during a fall festival that they had down there one October. You know, they were so proud of their Irish heritage. And, you know, but to come here into New York State and get elected to a statewide position, showing that you're not, you know, like you were saying, proud of your Judaism or embracing your Judaism in any way, you know, is a bit off-putting. You know, puts, you know, just, I don't know, it sort of puts it off a little bit. You know, it's a little off-putting.
The Rebbe once said, it's interesting, he says, how are, you know, a lot of people, I don't know if this is Governor Spitzer because like he's already second generation put off or something.
Yeah.
It's not like his parents wanted him, you know, to have something. I mean, I don't know his parents, but if they didn't educate him, didn't belong anywhere. But the Rebbe always felt, it's interesting about the Rebbe when people would say, well, my Judaism may get in the way of my career. He says, on the contrary, he says, people respect you. Just like you're saying, so respect. You say, oh, those Irishmen. You say, well, fine, you're an Irishman. Be proud of being Irish. There's only respect. And that's why I think, you know, non-Jewish people only respect, you know, people for saying, fine, you're Jewish, you know, I understand, it's the high holidays, and they respect that. They won't, you know, look down on that.
And a lot of times it's because people know where you're coming from. You know, it sort of builds a framework for who you are, and they know how centered you are when you say, I'm Irish, Italian, Jewish, you know, Hungarian, whatever. I mean, it sort of gives you a framework, and people like that. They like to know, who is this guy coming at me and talking to me, you know. So I would say that one of the other issues that this, you know, not being bar mitzvahed or having that ceremony, being called up for an aliyah, you know, not embracing your Judaism, is that his wife is not Jewish. He married someone, you know, Silda Wall Spitzer. She's a Southern Baptist upbringing from North Carolina, and he met her in college. And they, you know, were college sweethearts, and they got married. And they're bringing up their children, celebrating both types of holidays, Jewish holidays as well as, I guess, Southern Baptist or Christian holidays. I mean, I'm not quite sure what they do during the holiday time. May find out in December,
Yeah.
you know, if there's a menorah in the mansion still. I don't know. We'll see. But, you know, I mean, there are occasions when the governor traditionally comes to the Capitol, the third floor of the Capitol, to, you know, to address the Chabad community, for example, when around the Rebbe's birthday, I believe. I know that they passed that. Rabbi Butman comes up here and passes out matzah, and and the governors, Cuomo and Pataki, have both come up to talk to and pay their respects to Lubavitcher Rebbe, but also, you know, to honor Rabbi Butman and all the Chabad community. And I know all the assemblymen and senators who are Jewish or non-Jewish or represent Jewish communities, they come and join in on the ceremony at the Capitol. And it'll be interesting to see this year whether Governor Spitzer, you know, comes up to the third floor to the speaker's conference room and says, you know, hey, I'm here too, and what he has to say in terms of his Judaism at that time.
It's
you know,
yeah.
We'll see if he ignores that. Now, I do know that, you know, on St. Patrick's Day, pardon me, he did go to 3 masses.
Really?
Yeah, he attended mass at St. Patrick's Cathedral in Manhattan, among 2 other places. So, you know, that's a. You know, I know he embraced that. We'll see what else he embraces. You know, again, day one, everything changes. You don't know. But he's 47 years old, and I think by the time maybe he turns 50, so maybe in 3 years, maybe we can do the bar mitzvah for him. You know, maybe we can encourage him to be more sensitive. Maybe you'll officiate. Who knows? Maybe.
We'll see. Could be.
So, that's
I
the.
mean, in your opinion, do you think being, I mean, let's say he would be, let's just a fictional scenario, a person would be very Jewish-minded. Well, you have Speaker Silver, I mean, I mean, he's not the governor, he's obviously Speaker of the Assembly. And I just know he does put, I mean, there is things you can do. It's not just, all right, singing a song or going to a holiday, you know, or which is nice. But I mean, you know, even legalistic, you know, like even in the Assembly pushing some legislation, I know Speaker Silver does. You know, putting kosher legislation, for example. You know, it's there to his heart. I'm not saying maybe someone else would also, maybe, because, like, again, there's so many Jews or Orthodox Jews in New York State.
Well, you know, and there's another very religious Jew in the Assembly, Dov Hikind, who represents, I think, Borough Park, right? Yeah. And, you know, I mentioned to Dov Hikind about this. I said, you know, how can you know, usually he's not shy about endorsing Republicans. He's a very conservative Democrat, and he endorses Republicans regularly. And I said, why wouldn't you endorse John Faso, who was running against Elliot Spitzer for governor? And he says, because I didn't endorse Elliot because he was Jewish. I endorsed him because he'd be a good governor. And I endorsed him because of his ideas and his principles. And again, being Jewish didn't matter to Seligman Hikind. Again, when I spoke to any I mean, I wrote this article basically around the inaugural and the State of the State message, because a lot of people from all around the state came to the Capitol. So whenever I saw a rabbi in the halls, I stopped him and I asked him a couple of questions. And I spoke to folks from, rabbis from Orange County and from Brooklyn and from, upstate here. It just didn't matter. They didn't want to get into that whole issue of, being Jewish or Jewish to this extent or that extent or embracing it in any way. It just wasn't a factor for them. And I wasn't necessarily looking at it from a religious standpoint more than an ethnic standpoint. And that's why in the headline here it says ethnicity seen irrelevant in Rise of Spitzer, not religion seems irrelevant.
So you think it's maybe
It's
more correct
ethnicity.
or something?
It's more of the ethnicity, embracing the your ethnicity more so than embracing the religion, because you could be Jewish ethnically
Right.
as opposed to religiously. But he's not. He's very bland on all of that. He doesn't embrace it either way.
But this will say it'd be interesting to see that maybe as a role, people know he's Jewish, or he knows that people know he's Jewish. Maybe he'll just feel as a role model. I mean, like you say, ethnicity, some people, I say, I don't work on Yom Kippur. Not, I don't religion, I don't do anything, but it's just, people know I'm Jewish, and it doesn't look right. That's how they say to me. It just doesn't look right that people know that Jews should come to work on Yom Kippur. Not that I care about Yom Kippur, not that I even go to the synagogue on Yom Kippur, but I don't want people to talk. So, it's like I say, it's even beyond that. Like he'll say, hey, it's Hanukkah, or it's Rosh Hashanah, I got to do something. People know I'm Jewish. What does it look like? Here's a Jewish guy who comes to the office on Yom Kippur.
Well, here it is, coming up to talking about budget negotiations and the end of the budget deadline, and will we have a late budget or an on-time budget? And again, Passover is April 2nd, I believe, right?
Right, correct.
And it's 8 days. So it goes to April 10th, if my math is correct. And that Sunday is Easter Sunday, prior to, so it's like the 8th, 7th or 8th is Easter Sunday.
Right,
the 10th is a Tuesday, if I, have my math correct.
Good.
So people are saying the holiday period ends on that Sunday. They're not considering the last 2 days of the holiday, which is a yontiv. It's just not on the calendar. Passover, it says, April 2nd. It doesn't say Passover yontiv for the last 2 days. So what's going to happen, in the mindset of the capital? Will there be budget negotiations?
Well, Speaker Silver won't show up.
Okay, maybe he'll have some impact and some influence that way, and maybe that'll drive the process, and we'll just extend it an extra 2 days.
Before the Passover holiday, get it done.
But you mentioned to people who are looking at the calendar to say, and they say, oh, Easter Sunday ends the holiday period. I thought, no, it's April 10th that ends the holiday period. And I show them, I have to bring a Jewish calendar into the Capitol to show them it really is a little bit later than Easter Sunday. So it's a mindset, and the governor could really lead in that regard also. And just to he doesn't have to practice it, But it's an ethnicity type of thing. You know, you just have to be aware of it. It's an education. It's an awareness. So I think that's where the failing is on that side. You know, he wants to be a leader. Well, great, you know, but he can lead in so many more ways than what he's doing now. And everyone says, well, this is just enough. That's good. You know.
It's interesting which way you'll take, but he's still raw, he's still new. I mean, you know, like you say, the holidays haven't really rolled around. This is his first year of experience of
and
Passover,
that's why I said,
Hanukkah.
let's see what happens in December when he, you know, they're traditionally in the executive chamber, they decorate it with a tree, and they also have a menorah. And we'll see and the menorah is very nice. It's oil, and it's an oil menorah, and it's an older-fashioned menorah, and it's beautiful. We'll see what happens there. We'll see what happens if they do the Rebbe's birthday.
He'll show up.
Yeah, if he'll show up for that.
What kind of words he'll say?
Right, exactly. You know, will he be out of town coincidentally? Oh, sorry, you know. Wish I knew about this, you know. Well, it's every year the same day, you know. But you know, it's very interesting because I thought that some of these folks who I would have interviewed, you know, would have at least said you know, that yes, you know, okay, would have acknowledged or spoken more about the fact that it is an intermarriage and continuity is such an important part of our mantra of what we're trying to talk more about continuity and less about intermarriage. And here he is, the governor of the state, who's intermarried with another religion.
It's interesting. Well, it just shows even the Jewish mindset because it's probably, unfortunately, it's so acceptable in Jewish. Because I don't know if you would say 30, 40 years ago. Let's ask that question. Maybe in 1960, let's just in a time machine go back. It's 50 years, you know, 45 years ago, and say, oh, an intermarried Jew, would that go over well in the Jewish community, or it's, you know, and compare that to nowadays where it's just it's not accepted, or it's just say, listen, it's a fact of life.
Well, I'll read to you what Assemblyman Jack McEnany, who's Irish, but I spoke to him about this, and he said it says what direction the country is going in, and that a lot of the old barriers have disappeared. Remember, JFK was the first Catholic president. And I remember Senator Abraham Ribicoff of Connecticut. He says, I remember them writing at the time, 1972, he should have been one of the likely candidates for vice president at that time, but oh well, he was Jewish, and that wouldn't even be considered. 1972. All right? It's not the times they are changing. They have changed. The performance in office that you're going to see from Governor Spitzer is going to further break down barriers that shouldn't have been there in the first place. And he said, speaking as an Irish Catholic, and remembering well, I was 17 years old when JFK got elected, there were an awful lot of Catholics who played it down because you were being sensitive to anyone who wasn't of the same background, but also you didn't want to play that up. You wanted someone accepted on their own merits, and I think it's a subconscious thing that you do in anyone who has the same heritage and identity. You try to bring out to other people what he means in the big picture, regardless what his religion may be, by any standard. This is a man with extraordinary promise, McEnany speaking of Spitzer. He's a success with everything he's done, and when you deal with people who are not of the same ethnicity, you want to point out to them that if this were strictly on the merits, he would still be there. And I thought that summed it up beautifully. And but you know, the people, Alan Hevesy, who was the disgraced comptroller who had to resign from office, he was Jewish. Most people didn't realize that, but he had an intermarriage also. So we've had other statewide candidates who were Jewish who played down their religion and ethnicity, you know.
I mean, it's only a few months into the year, and you, like I say, you're our pulse on the Capitol. Putting Jewish aside, not just pure governor, I mean, I know I've heard that and I've read that from many people. Oh, he's going to be great, he's going to be great. So, you know, it's like baseball a little bit. You know, they're going to be great, and you never hear from them again. I mean, how was in actuality? It's one thing to say who he's going to be.
Well, I'm sort of comparing Governor Spitzer with his first term or first few months with Governor Schwarzenegger's first few months in California. And Governor Schwarzenegger had to learn very quickly how to deal with the legislative process. Governor Spitzer has always been known as a prosecutor. He's always been known as a legal eagle. It's a matter of now saying, all right, now I'm a chief executive, I'm not a prosecutor, I don't have to put everyone under the spotlight all the time. I can assuage them, I can make them feel more comfortable with getting from their opinion to where I need them to be. And he needs to show, the art of persuasion a little bit more and improve the rhetoric. He even said to someone, one of the leaders in the legislature, Jim Tedisco, who's the Assembly Republican leader, that I'm going to steamroll over you. And he's going to be the steamroller. And every time now, that's the big thing, steamroller Spitzer. So they're always, it's that moniker that he got for himself, that he made for himself, that he's a steamroller. Well, people like Senator Joe Bruno, for example, the Senate Majority Leader, he 77 years old, he says, I'm too old to be steamrolled over. I'll show him how to drive the steamroller, but he's got to learn from me. I'm not going to be steamrolled over, and I'm too old for that, and I don't have anything to lose, by it, so, he's not going to scare me. So there's all these fighting words going on amongst the leaders that are also leading to possibly a late budget, and they all said they want the right budget, not an on-time budget, which means we're probably going into April or May before we get a budget. And a lot of that is centered around health care. There's a big health care issue, that education also, but mainly health care is a big stumbling block.
Because of too much money? That's what
they're cutting. Well, the Governor Spitzer proposed the largest budget ever, over $120 billion, and increased just about everything, but he cut hospitals. He cut the aid to hospitals. He cut the money that would go to hospitals because he felt that's where the waste and spending is, that's where the fraud and abuse is, and he said that they're just not using the money properly. We need to get rid of giving money to the hospitals and let them fend for themselves. I mean, they can do fundraising, they can do naming rights, endowments, that sort of thing, but they need to figure out a way to do it on their own. But at the same time, just about, healthcare providers love the budget. I mean, all these lobbying groups, the teachers like the budget, but they say we just want more, And the School Boards Association said, the budget's great, and accountability, if the governor is proposing, it probably will be passed, that if school districts don't improve, the school board members could be fired and tossed out of office because they are elected. So the school board members, if they're not responsible and they're not spending the money right and improving the schools, which is their charge, then they could be dismissed before the next election. So that's pretty dramatic. So there are all these issues going on, but the arts groups are happy. They're getting an extra $4 million. They want $5 million, but they got $4 million, so they're always asking for an extra $1 million, no matter how much they're given more. And there are other groups that just keep saying, we want more money, but we're happy, thank you very much for what you gave us. So it was a very, it's a huge budget increase over last year, or this current year's budget, but it's way above any cost of living or inflation rate, and the governor just, figured he'd start off with that, and as the latest budget negotiations, he's imaging the Senate Majority Leader, the conservative Republican, as being the big spender because he wants to spend more money on the hospitals and to make them whole. So the governor's saying, look, we already spent a whole lot of money, now you want to even spend more, and everyone else is saying we got to cut spending, but you're saying, hey, spend more money, So it's really flipped around. They were like in an alternate universe at the Capitol, where the tax and spend Democratic liberals, are getting away from that label, and they're saying, hey, look, it's Joe Bruno who's been there all the time, like that. So
it's never a quiet, dull moment.
It's never a dull moment. It's always busy.
Your work is, you're never going to be without a story over here.
I hope not. And it looks like, like you said, it's going to be a very interesting year. The governor's also tackling a lot of important issues that normally take place after the budget's passed. Workers' comp reform, things that are not budget-related items per se. But those items are getting agreed upon and approved before the budget. So it may even be just a shorter session, and maybe session would end right after the budget's passed. you know, might not be much more work to be done after the budget's passed. So, as you would say, stay tuned.
That's it. That's we're going to have to stay tuned. But we're out of time. But we always enjoy Mark. Either he brings a guest or he brings himself. He always something to say and interesting. Our man in the Capitol over here, so he tells us what's happening. And thank you very much, Mark, of the statewide news service over here, and give you our blessing for success in all your endeavors.
Thank you very much.